Welcome to the Stoic Responder Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Healy. As a special agent who spent more than 15 years conducting large-scale fraud, money laundering, and public corruption investigations, Stoic philosophy provided a mindset edge that became the foundation of my professional success. My mission today is to share those same ancient mindset lessons with you so that you can turn obstacles into opportunities and adversity into advantage. Time to muster up. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Stoic Responder Podcast. This is episode 66. You are not rich. I'm going to get into something personal on this episode with regards to a controversy that happened at the end of last week involving a pretty well-known fitness influencer and some comments that he made about women in law enforcement. So some of you may be familiar with what I'm about to talk about, but before we get into it and break it all down for you, let me first direct y'all to one of my favorite 501c3 organizations, which is known as the Overwatch Collective. The Overwatch Collective is a nonprofit and podcast funding therapy sessions and supporting mental health initiatives for our first responders, veterans, and their families. Their motto is one more is one less, and I take that to heart because one more individual that we can provide services to is one less potential statistic. We've been talking a lot this month about suicide prevention awareness. September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and the work that the Overwatch Collective is doing to support our friends in law enforcement is saving lives. So please support them if you can over at the overwatchcollective.com. You can make a tax-deductible donation. You can buy some sweet gear. You can support some guys who are doing amazing things for law enforcement. Number two, quick shout out to Blue Badge Coffee Company. Mission of Blue Badge Coffee is to provide customers with the absolute best, highest quality premium coffee that their money can buy. They take a portion of each sale and donate it to law enforcement agencies around our great nation to assist them in funding and or maintaining peer support and wellness programs for their officers. These programs are crucial for the physical and mental well-being of hardworking officers and law enforcement agencies around the country. You can check them out at bluebadgecoffee.com. Guys, I don't do paid advertisements. Nobody's paying me to read these things. I believe in the mission of the Overwatch Collective. I believe in the mission of Blue Badge Coffee Company. I've met the people who are in charge of those organizations, and I believe in them personally. If you have a law enforcement related product and you would like me to talk about it on the podcast, let's link up. If you are serving the law enforcement community and you would like me to talk about it on the podcast, let's link up. Like I said, this is not advertisements that are paid for. I'm not looking to make money off of advertisements. I am looking to support other people in the law enforcement community who are doing good things for our community. And that's really what this podcast is all about. So thanks for joining me here. As I said, I wanted to jump in real quick. I think this issue that's happening in the law enforcement community right now that I'm going to talk about has a lot to do with today's topic, which is why I chose this topic. As I said, this is episode 66. The title is You Are Not Rich. Now, to the Stoics, the wise man is the ideal, right? And I love this because my fraternity, I was a Sigma Phi Epsilon, Sig Ep, and kind of the fraternity motto is the balanced man, strong mind, strong body, the kind of Greek ideal of having that balance between a strong, knowledge-seeking mind and a fit body that's ready for anything. That is the ideal, and that's the ideal that Zeno identified. That's the ideal that all the subsequent Stoics identified. That comes from that Athenian kind of Greek ancient world like concept of the balanced man. And even though it's the ideal, it's exceedingly rare. I think we can all agree that in modern society, there are a lot of people who are very wise, but not very fit or strong. They may have a strong mind, but not a strong body. Increasingly, there are people who have neither. There are people who spend all day with their faces in a phone, scrolling TikTok videos. They're not learning anything. They're not seeking knowledge. They're not gaining that strong mind. They certainly don't have that strong body. And I think it is vital for us to seek that ideal because it is so rare. It's only born out of constant practice, constant humility that we're able to seek and strive for that ideal, that we're able to gain that perfect consistency of our rational faculties so that we can see the world more clearly and act in accordance with the nature around us. But oftentimes what happens is because we have this device in our hand at all times that we can look up all of the knowledge in human history just looking at our phone, we believe that we know more than we do. we believe that we're far more advanced than we are. We give ourselves credit for how much we advance, right? The truth is, wisdom doesn't come as and let me start you out with a quote before I dive into this, because my show notes here are about this quote. So Epictetus says, when a youth was giving himself airs in the theater and saying, I am wise, for I have conversed with many wise men, Epictetus responded, I too have conversed with many rich men, yet I am not rich. In other words, wisdom isn't necessarily transferable. Just because you saw something or read something on your phone, just because you went on Twitter and had an opinion about the latest assassination attempt or the latest political nonsense, doesn't mean you actually know anything. You think that you know things, and I see this all the time, and we see this all the time in the law enforcement community, where individuals will judge an incident like the Tyreek Hill arrest, or it wasn't even an arrest, the traffic stop and citation and the temporary detention of an individual, where people will come in and comment on those things. A lot of times those people are the big vet bro accounts, and you know the ones, I don't have to name names, but the big accounts of individuals who served downrange during the global war on terror, who were engaged in a military career. That doesn't necessarily qualify them to understand domestic policing. They don't know anything about case law. They haven't done that job. Just because you carried a gun, just because you have tactical experience, just because you've engaged in shootouts, doesn't mean that all of your knowledge is transferable to a career where some of those same dynamics exist. See, when you're playing the home games and you're playing the away games, you have completely different rules of engagement. You have completely different governing philosophy. You have completely different ways of going about approaching the job. If you are engaged in a shootout with an individual, some of those skills, yes, may be transferable. But if you are engaged in a traffic stop with someone in Baghdad, during the occupation, or you're engaged in a traffic stop with someone in Miami outside of the Hard Rock Stadium, how you act in one space versus another is incredibly different. So the commentary that you see from some of those accounts, you just dismiss it. The problem is the common individual, the common man, assumes that these people have wisdom because they've been in what they describe as a comparable scenario, right? They worked a checkpoint in the green zone, or they did something that allowed them to say, oh, I've done traffic stops, or I would have done X, Y, and Z differently. Anybody is free to comment, but you're not wise, as Epictetus would say, because you've conversed with wise men, or because you've seen a video or seen something on the internet. You become wise by doing. I've been careful not to comment too much on the Tyreek Hill situation because in my job, I was a special agent. I was not a patrol officer. Now, I was engaged in traffic stops. I did traffic stops. I taught use of force. I taught constitutional cases and case law related to use of force. I went to multiple use of force instructor training programs at FLETC, at the National Firearms and Tactical Training Unit, at different stages of my career. I went back to refresher schools and all that stuff. I understand and know the constitutional law that was at play in that case, but I don't know department policy for that particular department. I don't know, I don't know how they're training, what they're trained to do, what their escalation or de-escalation training looks like. So I'm not commenting from a position of knowing exactly what happened there and what went down. If I comment on it, it's from the perspective of constitutional law. What broadly were they allowed to do from a use of force perspective? What does the relevant case law allow them to do in that situation? And from my view of it, they were completely within their rights as law enforcement officers to remove someone from the vehicle who was a known violent felon, who was not following directions, and who legitimately could have been making them feel unsafe with his dark tinted windows going up in the middle of a traffic stop. Now, he may have had legitimate reasons for not wanting to get out of the vehicle or be seen. He's a public figure, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't matter. The police were well within their rights to remove him from the vehicle and to sit him down on the curb while they finish their investigation. That's my view of it, and that's it, and that's all. I don't have a take on the tactics they employed to do it, or whether they jumped to conclusions, or whether they should have escalated or de-escalated, because I didn't do that particular job. I'm just looking at it from, as a use of force instructor, what do I see here, and does it pass constitutional muster? And that's it. You're going to have all sorts of people, and let me get into the meat of this. You're going to have all sorts of people who are going to view an incident through their own biases, through their own lenses. and they're going to assume that they know more about something than they do, and they're going to speak with expertise on it. And there's an entire industry out there of people who are producing content on social media, producing podcasts, producing Instagram videos, TikToks, and Reels, saying hot takes about whatever the emerging news is of the day, whether we're talking about law enforcement incidents or something else. They have become hot take artists because it fuels their brand. It brings eyes to their page, and those eyes relate to dollars. They relate to advertisements. They relate to being well known. It's the same reason I do this podcast. It's the same reason I produce content on social media. I don't particularly like being in the public eye. I spent 15 years not being in the public eye. I don't particularly like showing up here every day. But in order for me to share a message and get people to listen to this message and hopefully improve and better their lives, I have to show up here. I have to do this sort of stuff. People aren't going to find me if I'm speaking into the couch in my living room without putting it out there on the internet. The problem that I have, and I think that Epictetus is referring to here, is individuals who claim that they have knowledge that they don't truly have, who claim that they are individuals as the youth giving himself airs in the theater saying, I am wise for I have conversed with many wise men. No, you become wise by seeking wisdom and then practicing the wisdom that's been given to you. You become rich by speaking with rich men, learning what they did, and then doing the same. And that's what Epictetus is saying here. You're not rich by talking to a rich man. You don't know anything about law enforcement because you watched a couple internet videos. The guys who were in that video had 20 plus years experience engaging in traffic stops, engaging in these sorts of situations. They've forgotten more about how to do that job than 99 out of 100 people watching that video will ever know about how to do that job. See, wisdom comes from conversations with the wise in the same way that wealth comes from conversations with the wealthy. It doesn't, right? We actually have to practice and apply that which we learn to gain both wisdom and health, to gain wealth, to gain whatever. We have to seek constant improvements as we do. So we have to be humble, right? Like, I'm not saying we know everything just because we've been doing it forever. In fact, some of the worst people in our industry double down on stupid every day. They do the wrong thing every single day. But the path to true wisdom is not stopping at talking to someone. It's practicing and doing and getting better. And your ego is always going to impede improvement. It's always going to cloud reality. So let me get to the topic of the day. Last week, of course, was National Women in Law Enforcement Day, where we celebrate our colleagues, the people who wear the badge, wear a gun, do the job. And I don't know what the exact statistics are. I can tell you from my experience that it was about I would say, in my agency, about an 80% male-dominated agency, and I think that's probably pretty consistent across agencies. I think in my academy class, my first academy I went to, which was a uniform police academy, I think we had maybe four women out of, I think, 48 students in the class. So not a high percentage, right? Maybe it might have been more than that. Four to six, I would say, out of about 48. So a relatively small percentage of the class. And then when I went through as a criminal investigator, as a special agent through the criminal investigator training program, we had more women in that class, but still not more than, at best, maybe a quarter of the class was female. And I don't even know that it was that many. To the point where, most of the groups that you were in, where you did your job, we kind of broke things down into 6-person groups that you rotated through. I think I had two out of 6 of us at my table were female, and that was pretty consistent. It was 1 to 2 out of each 6-person table in a 48-person class. And so what you end up seeing that is throughout your career, it tends to be a pretty male-dominated profession. Now, you work with a lot of women in the field, but you also work with a lot of women in the prosecutor's office. There's a ton of great prosecutors out there who are women, and probably closer to 50-50 numbers when you get onto that side of the house. But what I will say, and I've talked about this before, and you can go back and listen to this on a past episode where my friend Jeff Fields and I discussed and broke down that first Trump assassination attempt and how people came out of the weeds to complain about women in law enforcement. Oh, these are DEI hires, et cetera, et cetera. And we laid it out why that is all BS, why none of that's true. As long as you have a standard that needs to be maintained, and that standard allows you to practice weapons manipulation, to practice, taking someone into custody, to have my back in an incident when I need it, I have no problem with you being a man or a woman in the field. I don't care. As long as you pass the standard that we all have to pass, and I can count on you to help me come home alive, and you can count on me to come home alive. I don't care what body parts you have. That is all irrelevant to me and to 99 out of 100 other people who have ever worn a badge or a gun. I've gone into search warrants with men. I've gone in with women. I've gone in with both. I've had female partners. I've had male partners. I judge each individual based on their merit and their ability to do the job. End of story. And I think most other cops do the same. However, hot take artists on the internet, one in particular is an entrepreneur named Andy Frisella. If you're in the fitness space at all, you know who he is. He's the CEO of First Form, which is a major supplement company. He came out last week on that day, on Women in Law Enforcement Day, and he stuck his foot directly in his mouth. He came out on this very popular podcast. I believe it's called Real AF. I've listened to it before. It's like an entrepreneurial podcast, but he's mostly talking about events of the day. And it's just, loudmouth dude, bro, whatever. And he came out and he said that women shouldn't be in law enforcement. They shouldn't be in the field. And he basically said that they only want to be in law enforcement to make men feel less than themselves. And it was a wild thing to say. I've watched the clip. I've seen it. I'm not taking this out of context. These are things that he said. And he related to personal experiences. Anytime he's ever had to deal with a woman in law enforcement, they've been the worst. They've been the rudest. They've been X, Y, and Z. If they didn't have a badge and a gun, you could punch your fist right through their face, and you could turn their lights out. That was a very awful thing to say. He has since removed the episode. He's since put out an apology saying he was wrong. What I'm saying here, number one, I don't need to defend the women in law enforcement. They're more than capable of defending themselves. But I want to defend the honor of the people that I served with in particular. He couldn't be more wrong about the people that I served with. I served with great agents who were women, great agents who were men. I served with shitty agents who were women, shitty agents who were men. It's like any profession. There's going to be a certain percentage that don't pass muster that you look at and wonder, how did this person graduate the academy? And there are going to be a vast majority who you would trust your life to, male or female, doesn't matter. So he's speaking from a position of ignorance, which is often the case with these hot take artists. And even though this guy is probably on the right of the political spectrum, he's probably more aligned with most people in law enforcement from a policy perspective, from a law and order perspective. It was tremendously toxic and ignorant BS coming out of his mouth. But it's indicative of this problem, to bring it full circle, that Epictetus was talking about 2,000 years ago. You are not wise for having conversed with wise men. You don't become rich for having conversed with rich men, right? If that were the case, Andy Frisella, who is worth millions upon millions of dollars, incredibly successful entrepreneur, listening to his podcast would make me a more successful entrepreneur, right? Having a conversation with a successful entrepreneur should make me one. Just like you having an opinion about law enforcement, about women in law enforcement, because you interacted with a couple of them in the course of your civilian life, gives you the right to determine who should be in the field, right? No, that's not how any of this works. So we live in a hot take society. We live in a culture where people like that exist, and they get money and they get fame and they get attention and they get speaking gigs and they get brought onto other podcasts because they jump into every fray and say things without thinking about them. What Epictetus would tell us to do here is to be careful, whether it's online, whether it's on a microphone, whether it's in person. And Epictetus has said this, and Seneca has said this, and Marcus Aurelius and Cato. Cato in particular said, I only begin to speak when I am sure that what I have to say is not better left unsaid. I think we all could learn from this example. Of spouting off and saying something that's woefully ignorant, that doesn't have any basis in reality, that isn't something that is rooted in fact, but that comes across as authoritative because you're a big, strong dude with a microphone. Dude has no tactical experience. Dude didn't serve in the military. He wasn't in law enforcement. He actually doesn't know anything about constitutional standards, about the law, about how these things work, about how people are selected, about the training they go through, about the standards they have to uphold. But he feels confident saying these things and being considered wise because he has conversations with others on his podcast that pump him up and make him feel that way. It's a cautionary tale. Again, it goes back 2,000 years, if not longer. It's probably a condition of the human experience that goes back to us sitting around campfires, cooking turtles, 50,000 years ago at the dawn of mankind, right? This probably goes back that far. Having an opinion doesn't make you wise any more than having a couple dollars in your pocket makes you rich. You are not rich. Continue to pursue the ideal. Continue to pursue the strong mind, the strong body. Don't be irrational. Don't be a loudmouth asshole. Don't feel the need to comment on every single issue that comes across your news feed, that comes across your Twitter feed, that comes across your Facebook timeline. Because the odds are good that you're going to end up eating a lot of crow and looking like a fool, like our friend Andy Frisella. So, ego, I guess the takeaway here, and I'll leave you with this, ego is going to impede your ability to become more wise. It's going to impede your ability to improve. Your ego is getting in the way. And I think that is the purpose of what Epictetus is saying, is that we should continue to pursue the ideal and stop thinking that we know more than we do, because we've had conversations with people or seen things that make us think that we are in a position that we're not. Your ego is impeding, in other words, your ability to improve. So thank you for listening to my rant about Andy Frisella. I hope I didn't just turn it into a just kind of tit for tat ugliness. The man's he's a hell of an entrepreneur, and I think unfortunately he's probably going to suffer professionally for running his mouth when he shouldn't have. And hopefully that's a cautionary tale for the rest of us to acknowledge what we don't know and not let our ego impede our improvement. So let's leave you with a quick journal entry. It's an easy one here. Let's write this down. Where am I acting like Andy Frisella? Where is my ego impeding my ability to gain wisdom and to improve? Where is my ego impeding my ability to gain wisdom and to improve? So I got 3 more episodes this week. Thanks for listening and tuning in. If you'd like to continue to support this podcast, you can do so by picking up a copy of my book, In Valor, 365 Stoic Meditations for First Responders. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere you get your books. It's available on Kindle or Nook for instant download, or you can order it, get it Amazon Prime. If you have read the book or are reading the book, please do me a favor, go back onto Amazon and leave a review. 5-star review would be awesome. We sure would love it. Those reviews really help me get in front of more people, so I would really, truly appreciate it. Number 2, you can support this podcast by subscribing to the Stoic Responder Substack for free. On that page, you're going to get the podcast delivered directly to your email 4 times a week. You're going to get my weekly newsletter with Stoic leadership and personal development tips as well. And finally, the easiest thing that you can do to support this podcast is to like, share, and subscribe so that others can learn about what we're doing here. And if you are enjoying it, give the podcast a 5-star review as well. That's what I got for you today. Get out there. Say thank you to a female in law enforcement. They have to put up with more than a lot of people. They have to put up with an awful lot, not just from the public at large, but from ignorant fellow officers a lot of the time as well. So do yourself a favor. Say thanks to a cop in law enforcement or a female cop in law enforcement, if you would. And until next time, folks, you are out of roll. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, like, rate, and share this podcast so that we can spread the benefits of Stoicism to other first responders. It will only take you a few moments, but it can help us tremendously. Until next time, out of roll.